There is a bottle sitting in most kitchens right now that has been used for thousands of years across some of the healthiest populations on Earth. And the majority of men using it have absolutely no idea that it could be doing something meaningful for their hormone health if they simply used it differently. I'm Dr. Fernanda Oliveira, board certified urologist, and today I want to talk about something that might seem surprisingly simple for a medical conversation: olive oil. Specifically, a small bedtime habit that combines extra virgin olive oil with one or two other ingredients that most men already have in their kitchen, and what that combination may do for hormone support and overnight recovery in men over 50. Now, I want to be clear with you from the start, the way I always am on this channel. I am not going to tell you that pouring olive oil into a spoon every night before bed will solve everything. That is not how the body works, and that is not the kind of conversation I want to have with you. What I am going to do is explain the actual biological mechanisms, how healthy fats relate to hormone production, what the body is doing overnight, and what it needs to do it properly, and why the specific timing of this habit matters more than most people realize. By the end of this video, you will understand not just what to do, but precisely why it works. And that understanding is what turns a casual attempt into a consistent habit. But before the science, let me speak to you for a moment about something more personal. My dear friend, if you have been feeling over the past few years like your body has quietly shifted into a lower gear, less energy in the morning than you expect, less stamina through the day than you used to have, a reduced confidence in intimate situations that you haven't quite wanted to name out loud, I want you to hear this clearly. There is no reason whatsoever to feel embarrassed about those changes. Millions of men just like you are navigating this exact experience after 50, and the vast majority of them are doing it in silence, assuming it's simply what this decade of life is supposed to feel like. I see this every single day in my practice. Men who are otherwise healthy, active, engaged in their lives, and who are carrying a quiet frustration about the gap between how they feel and how they remember feeling not that many years ago. That gap is real, and it has a biological explanation that is far more specific and far more actionable than just aging. Let me tell you about a patient of mine, a man in his late 50s, someone who ate reasonably well by most standards, exercised a few times a week, didn't smoke, limited his alcohol. By conventional measures, he was doing the right things, but his energy had been steadily declining for about 3 years. His mornings felt flat. His motivation had dimmed in ways that were beginning to affect his relationship and his sense of himself. When we looked carefully at his full picture, his diet in detail, his sleep quality, his evening habits, one of the things that stood out was how heavily his cooking relied on refined vegetable oils, and how almost entirely absent genuine healthy fats were from his daily intake. Not dramatically absent, subtly absent. The kind of gap that doesn't announce itself loudly, but that accumulates over years into something the body genuinely feels. We made several adjustments, but one of the simplest was introducing a small daily serving of high-quality extra virgin olive oil in the evening as part of a brief bedtime ritual. Within a few weeks, he described something I hear in variations from patients regularly: a steadiness returning. Not a sudden dramatic shift, but a quiet stabilization of his energy and his mornings that hadn't been there before. He couldn't point to one specific thing that had changed, but the foundation had shifted and the body was responding to it. That is the kind of improvement I want to help you understand today. Gradual, genuine, built on biology rather than marketing. So let's talk about what's actually happening in your body, because this is where the olive oil story gets genuinely interesting, and where most men have a significant blind spot. Testosterone is a steroid hormone, and the word steroid, stripped of all its cultural baggage, simply refers to a molecule built from a lipid backbone, specifically from cholesterol and dietary fat. Your body cannot synthesize testosterone without adequate fat in the system. It is not optional. It is not a factor among many factors. It is one of the fundamental raw materials from which the hormone is literally constructed at a molecular level. This matters enormously for men over 50 because many of the dietary patterns that became normalized in the 80s and 90s, low-fat diets, the widespread replacement of natural fats with refined vegetable oils, the cultural messaging that fat itself was the enemy, created a generation of men who have been inadvertently depriving their hormone production systems of one of the things those systems need most. And the refined vegetable oils that filled the gap? High in omega-6 fatty acids, which in the quantities modern diets deliver them, promote systemic inflammation. And systemic inflammation is one of the most well-documented suppressors of testosterone production at the cellular level. Think of it this way. The cells in the testes responsible for producing testosterone, Leydig cells, are exquisitely sensitive to their biochemical environment. When that environment is clean and well supplied, when the right fats are present and inflammation is low, these cells function efficiently and hormone production proceeds as it should. But when the fat profile is poor and inflammatory signals are elevated, which is the chronic state of many men eating a standard modern diet heavy in processed foods and refined oils, Leydig cell function is compromised. Output declines, and the man feels it, gradually and cumulatively, in exactly the ways my patients describe. Extra virgin olive oil enters this picture as one of the most well-studied sources of monounsaturated fat available, specifically oleic acid, which constitutes the majority of its fat content. Monounsaturated fats support the lipid environment that hormone synthesis requires. They carry a favorable anti-inflammatory profile, particularly in the context of the Mediterranean dietary pattern that researchers have studied extensively for its associations with metabolic health, cardiovascular resilience, and longevity. And unlike many supplements marketed to men for hormone support, olive oil is a whole food with thousands of years of human use and decades of rigorous scientific investigation behind it. The Mediterranean angle is worth pausing on for a moment because I think it reframes what we're talking about in a way that's genuinely useful. The populations that have consumed olive oil as a dietary cornerstone for generations, in Greece, in southern Italy, in coastal Spain, consistently show better metabolic markers, better cardiovascular outcomes, and better hormonal profiles into later life than populations whose diets are dominated by processed fats. This is not a coincidence, and it is not explained entirely by other lifestyle factors. The fat itself matters. The quality of the fat, the form it comes in, and the way it interacts with the body's biological systems at a cellular level. These things have measurable consequences. Now, here is where the bedtime timing becomes specifically relevant, and this is the piece that I find most men find surprising when I explain it. Because simply adding more olive oil to your cooking during the day is beneficial, I'm not dismissing that at all. But taking a small amount specifically in the evening as part of a deliberate pre-sleep routine adds a layer of effect that daytime consumption doesn't fully replicate. Your body's most intensive hormonal production window is overnight. During deep sleep, those slow wave cycles that occur primarily in the first half of the night, testosterone production reaches its daily peak. Growth hormone is released. Tissue repair accelerates. The entire endocrine system uses the relative quiet of sleep to do its most significant work. And what that work requires is not just the absence of stress and the presence of adequate sleep duration. It also requires the right metabolic environment to be in place when the process begins. When you provide the body with a small amount of high-quality fat in the period before sleep, you are contributing to that metabolic environment in a targeted way. The fat is available as a substrate for the hormonal synthesis that will occur during the night. The body doesn't have to draw entirely on reserves or on the less favorable fat profile from earlier in the day. You are, in a very practical sense, stocking the overnight workshop with better raw materials before the night shift begins. And when you combine that olive oil with cinnamon, specifically Ceylon cinnamon, which supports insulin sensitivity and helps maintain stable blood sugar through the night, you add another layer of benefit. Stable blood sugar overnight means stable cortisol, and stable cortisol means uninterrupted testosterone production, because cortisol and testosterone exist in biological opposition. When one rises, the other tends to fall. Keeping cortisol from spiking during the night directly protects the hormonal work the body is trying to do. Think of cinnamon in this context as a thermostat for your overnight metabolic environment. It helps the body maintain the stable, regulated conditions under which hormone production can proceed without disruption. And a small addition of raw honey, if you choose to include it, contributes the gentle liver glycogen support we've discussed in previous conversations, keeping the body's blood sugar backup system quietly functional through the early morning hours when those reserves matter most. The combination is simple: a small spoonful of extra virgin olive oil, half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon, and optionally a small amount of raw honey taken together approximately 30 to 45 minutes before bed. That is the entire habit. 2 minutes of preparation, ingredients available at any grocery store, and a biological rationale that connects directly to the specific systems a man over 50 most needs to support. But before I walk you through exactly how to make this work consistently, and before I give you the complete evening routine that makes the habit most effective, I need to tell you about 4 mistakes that quietly undermine everything this habit is trying to accomplish. Because I've seen too many men add one good habit to an evening that still contains several habits working directly against their recovery, and then wonder why the results are underwhelming. One of those mistakes involves something that happens in almost every household every single evening, and that most men have never once identified as a problem. And when I tell you what it is, I think you're going to recognize it immediately. Stay with me. The mistakes are where we start because the olive oil habit is genuinely effective, but it's working within a system. And if that system has significant leaks, the results will be modest at best. These 4 errors are common, correctable, and once you understand why each one matters, they become relatively easy to address. The first mistake is one I mentioned just before the break, and it is this: the cooking oil situation in most American kitchens. Corn oil, vegetable oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil. Refined, processed, cheap, and used in enormous quantities across the standard daily diet without a second thought. These oils are dominated by omega-6 fatty acids, and while omega-6 fats are not inherently harmful in modest amounts, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 in the typical modern diet has become dramatically skewed. Estimates suggest most men are consuming somewhere between 15 and 20 times more omega-6 than omega-3 on any given day. That imbalance drives chronic, low-grade inflammation throughout the body. And as we discussed earlier, chronic inflammation directly suppresses the cellular machinery responsible for testosterone production. The practical correction here is not complicated, but it does require a deliberate decision the next time you're at the grocery store. Replace your everyday cooking oil with extra virgin olive oil wherever the cooking temperature allows. For higher heat cooking, avocado oil is an excellent alternative with a favorable fat profile and a high smoke point. The goal is not perfection. It's a meaningful reduction in the refined omega-6 load your body is carrying daily. That reduction, sustained over weeks and months, creates a less inflammatory internal environment in which hormone production can operate more effectively. The bedtime olive oil habit is working in the same direction, but it works significantly better when the rest of your fat intake isn't pushing against it all day. The second mistake involves dinner, and specifically the timing and size of it. Late, heavy meals taken close to bedtime are one of the most consistent sleep disruptors I encounter in my male patients over 50, and the hormonal consequences of that sleep disruption are significant. When you eat a large meal within an hour or 2 of going to bed, the digestive process keeps the body in a metabolically active state during the early part of the night. Core body temperature stays elevated, insulin remains elevated, blood is directed toward the gut rather than toward the restorative processes that need to happen elsewhere. Deep sleep is delayed or compressed, and the testosterone production window that depends on those early deep sleep cycles is shortened as a result. Finish dinner 2 to 3 hours before bed. Let digestion do the majority of its work while you're still upright and your body is in its active daytime mode. By the time you lie down, your system should be settling rather than laboring. And the small bedtime mixture, the olive oil, the cinnamon, the optional honey, is not a meal. It is a targeted nutritional signal, a small metabolic preparation for the night ahead, not an additional digestive burden. The third mistake is the one I find most consistently underappreciated, and it's one we've touched on across multiple videos because it keeps appearing at the center of so many men's health concerns: magnesium deficiency. The research is consistent. A significant proportion of men over 50 are not meeting adequate magnesium intake, and the consequences ripple across sleep quality, vascular function, muscle relaxation, and testosterone metabolism simultaneously. Magnesium supports the biological activity of testosterone in the blood. It supports the nervous system's transition into the deep sleep states where hormonal production is concentrated, and it relaxes the smooth muscle tissue in blood vessel walls, improving the circulation that carries hormonal signals to the tissues that depend on them. 200 to 400 milligrams of magnesium glycinate taken in the evening alongside your bedtime mixture addresses this deficiency directly and in a form the body absorbs efficiently. As always, if you have any underlying health conditions or take medications, check with your doctor before adding any supplement to your routine. But for the majority of men over 50, this is one of the highest return, lowest risk additions available. The fourth mistake is screen exposure late at night, and I want to spend a moment on this one because I think its impact on hormonal health is genuinely underestimated. Most men understand vaguely that screens before bed aren't ideal for sleep. What they don't always understand is the specific hormonal mechanism involved. Blue light emitted by phones, tablets, and televisions suppresses melatonin production by signaling to the brain that it's still daytime. Delayed melatonin means delayed sleep onset. But more than that, melatonin itself has a protective relationship with testosterone. Research suggests melatonin helps regulate the hormonal environment during sleep, and its suppression doesn't just affect how quickly you fall asleep. It affects the quality of the sleep cycles that follow, including the deep stages where testosterone production is most active. 30 to 60 minutes of screen-free time before bed is not a minor lifestyle nicety. For men over 50 whose hormonal production is already working with reduced efficiency, it is a meaningful intervention. Replace that time with something that genuinely winds the nervous system down. Slow breathing, light reading with a warm lamp, a quiet conversation. Give the melatonin cascade the uninterrupted darkness it needs to initiate properly, and the sleep that follows will be measurably deeper and more hormonally productive. Now, let's put the complete evening together because the routine as a whole is more powerful than any individual piece within it. Begin with a light dinner, finish 2 to 3 hours before your intended sleep time. After dinner, a short walk, 10 minutes is entirely sufficient, to stabilize blood sugar, activate gentle circulation through the pelvic region, and begin the cortisol decline that signals the transition from day to night. Come home. Let the environment quiet down. Dim the lights. Step away from screens. About 30 to 45 minutes before bed, prepare your mixture. 1 tablespoon of high-quality extra virgin olive oil. Look for cold-pressed, stored in a dark bottle, with a harvest date on the label if possible, because olive oil degrades over time and fresh, high-quality oil delivers significantly more of the beneficial compounds than old or poorly stored varieties. Add half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon. Stir them together. If you find the taste difficult on its own, and some men do, particularly at first, add a small teaspoon of raw honey, which softens the flavor considerably while contributing its own gentle metabolic benefit. Take your magnesium glycinate alongside it, and then sit with it for a moment. Drink it slowly, breathe slowly. Let the physical act of this small, intentional ritual be part of the signal to your nervous system that the day is genuinely over and recovery can begin. Then sleep, at a consistent time, for 7 to 8 hours. That consistency of schedule is not incidental. Your body's hormonal production systems are governed by circadian timing, and a regular sleep window allows those systems to run with precision rather than uncertainty. I want to tell you honestly what to expect from this, because managing expectations well is part of what determines whether someone stays with a habit long enough for it to actually work. The first changes most men notice are in sleep quality. Within 1 to 2 weeks of consistent practice, the olive oil mixture, the magnesium, the screen-free wind down, the consistent bedtime, sleep tends to become deeper and more restorative. Men describe waking up with a different quality of alertness, not just rested, but genuinely recovered, which is a distinction that becomes very clear once you experience it after a period of chronically insufficient recovery sleep. The hormonal improvements follow the sleep improvements, typically by several weeks. Energy through the day becomes more stable. The afternoon heaviness that many men have accepted as normal begins to lift. Morning vitality returns gradually, not all at once, not dramatically, but progressively and reliably over the course of a month or more of genuine consistency. One of my patients in his early 60s, after about 5 weeks of following this kind of evening routine, described his energy as feeling earned again. He meant that it felt like it was coming from somewhere real inside him, rather than being borrowed from caffeine or willpower. That is exactly the kind of shift this approach is designed to produce. I want to address something important before we finish, because I always do. If you are experiencing persistent fatigue that doesn't improve with lifestyle adjustments, significant changes in sexual function, urinary symptoms, or anything that concerns you about your health, please do not rely on olive oil and cinnamon as your answer. See a qualified healthcare professional. Get a proper evaluation. These habits support the body's natural recovery systems, and for the majority of men dealing with common age-related changes, they can make a real and meaningful difference. But they are not a substitute for clinical care when clinical care is what's needed. Your health is worth a proper conversation with a doctor who can examine you individually. For everyone watching who is ready to take this simple step, go to the comments right now and type the words, "I'm trying this tonight." Make that small commitment publicly. The act of naming it changes the likelihood of following through, and following through is everything here. And if this video gave you something useful today, a clearer understanding of what your body needs and why, a practical habit you can begin tonight, please subscribe to this channel. Every single week, I bring you honest, clinically grounded, genuinely useful guidance to help men over 50 stay strong, stay healthy, and stay fully alive in their own lives. Your body is waiting for the right support, my friend. Tonight is a perfectly good night to begin giving it that. I'll see you in the next one. Take good care of yourself.